Hi, everyone. Delighted to be staring into the shelfie space, the wonderful shelfie space of comics creator, author Amy Chase. Thank you, Amy, for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. I know that you've created in lots of shared universes, and on this episode, we're talking about someone that I've spent some time with, Shakespeare, and some of those pieces, and a book called Abuzz. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm very excited. And it is funny because I do treat it like, I've worked on licenses like My Little Pony and Dungeons and Dragons. And while A Buzz is an original adaptation, it is still, throw it back to William Shakespeare. So at least it was a very, very cool experience for my first like full-length graphic novel script to have that framework, but also then be able to go a little off the rails with it.
Curious about what led you to comics and the graphic novel space. Any particular elements of fandom there that connected you or anything like that?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird origin story because I was super into the original Teen Titans cartoon on Cartoon Network when I was growing up. But at the time, DC didn't really have a lot of synergy with the Teen Titans comics were not geared for the same audience that the Teen Titans show was. I remember the first time I learned about the Judas contract and like how that actually goes in the comics, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they, did a successful adaptation of that for kids, which I guess is a great theme for today. But that was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, I only know the Teen Titans. I don't know, where the crossover is. But I was also really big into The Simpsons. And so I had a science teacher who ran a summer camp, and he would we would go to important California, like landmarks and locales and like learn a little bit more about our state. And one year he took us to San Diego Comic-Con, and I think it was because he wanted to go to Comic-Con, but he's like, this is a really important part of California culture. And so I got a little
Hmm.
bit more exposure there, and I discovered Bongo comics. And so I made the bridge into comic book shopping with Simpsons comics, actually. And then it kind of grew from there, and I started to, connect with Marvel characters and the Marvel movies coming out. And so I will admit that in a large part, I am like the movies to comics pipeline. Like once the
Hmm.
Marvel stuff
Hmm.
started coming out for the MCU, that's when I like really figured out. And I was older then, and went to my local store. And so I really loved that. And then that led to me getting a job at the local comic book store where I was for college. And that went really well. And I actually leveraged that into leverage. Oh my God, such a corporate word. My current day job, which is marketing and collectibles. And so it was a great growth pathway, and comics have stayed with me the whole way. And it's a lot of like, I want to tell those kinds of stories too.
I appreciate the synergy of the word leverage. Absolutely, absolutely.
We'll have to
And I
circle
have to.
back and put a pin
That's
in
right.
it.
That's right. I am also, I think it's hard to separate movies and comics because I go back to the 1980s, but, once I got introduced to DC, there was the immediate rise of DC media.
I'm never about the kind of gatekeeping because like every comic is going to be somebody's first comic. It doesn't matter if they saw a movie first or not. Like, you want people to get excited about that kind of stuff because then they're the type of people who might turn into the ones who are writing your next favorite thing. So I think it's a great ecosystem.
Just part of telling stories these days across media and all the things.
Yeah.
We're curious about because a buzz references back to someone that I had to negotiate with as an English teacher, Mr. William Shakespeare. So curious about your introduction to Shakespeare and some of those themes and ideas and what resonates with you from that world of creating as well.
Yeah, so I know for sure, like, everybody gets assigned some Shakespeare in high school. Um, and now I'm not exactly remembering all of the ones that I was assigned, but I'm pretty sure we had Romeo and Juliet, pretty sure we had Macbeth, and I'm pretty sure we had
Mhm.
Hamlet. And I know for sure we had Midsummer Night's Dream. And so, you're always there are the titans of the Shakespeare world, and those tend to be the ones that I think people will either love and then decide they love Shakespeare, or hate and resent because it was homework and then decide that they don't want to do any Shakespeare. Um, and I was also a theater kid, and so we had a Drama Teachers Association of Southern California festival. And every year in the fall, it was like open theme. And in the spring, it was centered around Shakespeare, around the time of Shakespeare's birthday. Um, and I participated in that several times as well. So then I got my exposure to Julius Caesar through that. And so there were ones I liked and ones I didn't. I gravitate more towards the comedies, personally. And one of the assignments that really cemented it for me was when we did Midsummer Night's Dream. That teacher had us pick scenes and partner up with our classmates and actually work on blocking a scene out. Because again, she was very strong in the fact that like, yeah, you can sit there and read it and I can assign you a chapter, but like unless you're hearing it out loud and seeing the movement, like some of it might not make as much sense as it should. And so I remember I teamed up with one of my friends who was also in the drama class, and two of our friends who were not in the drama class. We picked a scene that had Helena and Hermia, and then the boys were like kind of peripheral to it. And we were like, don't worry, we've got this. And it was a fight scene. And we had just learned like stage fighting in drama class. And so we learned how to like pull somebody by their hair. And so we did this whole like slapstick routine. And I remember we were the only group that got 100 on the project. And I was like, oh, I get it. Like it's so fun. And I like the kind of language puzzle of it, like figuring out, what the sentences and the jokes mean and all the references. And, when you feel like you understand the humor, it feels like an inside joke. And so I loved that in high school. And in college, I took a couple more playwright courses. And I don't think it was a full Shakespeare class, but there was some class where my professor showed us, because it had just come out, the Joss Whedon adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing. And so that I think was my first exposure to Much Ado About Nothing. And I loved that one too. I just loved the back and forth banter, the insults. And I remember, had to write some essays about it. But I'm the kind of nerd that like likes to take those things and dissect them and see how the story works, how the language works. And so it just kind of continued from there. But from that adaptation, Much Ado was my favorite. And then I remember going back and doing the Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson version, which is my all-time favorite. Um,
Mhm.
and then it just blossomed from there. But like I know that one's always fun because you always see, when a theater company will announce the production, like you're always like, ooh, who's Beatrice and who's Benedict? And like that's always they've had some great pairings of that over the years. But that's, it just kind of crescendoed. But I was the right mix of like word nerd and drama kid to make it really, like the perfect combination for me in class and school.
And you mentioned the names Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, and I'm like top tier Shakespeare.
100%. Because that's the other thing is like, because I think a lot of people's exposure in class is like if the teacher makes you read it out loud, it's people who don't know necessarily what they are saying. They're just reading the words. And so when you hear people who know what they are saying, it doesn't matter if you know what every single like ye old word is, because if you can tell that they know what they're saying, you can still feel the emotion of it. Um, and it was funny in the last year while I was writing Abuzz, a local theater company did like a teenage Shakespeare production, and it was Much Ado About Nothing, and it was inspired by Top Gun, which I thought was a hilarious like adaptational twist, but like you could tell the kids didn't know Top Gun either. And so
Yeah.
like I was like they're playing songs in between all the scenes that are older than all of these children. But it was interesting because you could kind of tell which children were just saying the lines they had learned to memorize and who kind of understood what they were supposed to be saying, like, oh, this is an insult, so I'm gonna say it like this. But I thought it was adorable, and it was really fun to see actors who were about the ages of the characters that we were writing for a buzz. So that was like a really weird meta moment for me as well.
Uh, the levels of meaning and knowing what you mean and knowing what you're saying. Yeah. What was it like to bring the story into a comic space as a writer? What were the important parts that you wanted to bring through?
So that's a great question. It's a lot of fun because I've been thinking about it lately. I've been talking with a lot of my friends about like how well you can visualize things in your head. I know that the internet has had many discussions about that, like what do you see when you have to picture an apple? And I'm a very visual, like I can see it in my head. And so one of the elements of this that was a lot of fun to work with Stelladia, the artist, on was the actual physicality of the characters, the space that they were inhabiting, and the setting, because elements of it were almost as if we were blocking a play. We have a little bit more room to, change camera angles than a stage production would. But one of my favorite scenes, and I think probably one of the greatest examples of Stellatia's ability to do visual comedy in the book, is the whole like double cross, double like eavesdropping while the group is trying to get Beatrice to like fall in love with Benedict, and then Benedict is overhearing. And so in this book, one of those scenes takes place in the cafeteria at the school, and the other scene takes place in the locker room in the gym. And so we had to like lay out the scenes and be like, okay, there's going to be movement and crawling, and they have to get, someone ends up in a trash can, someone ends up in a laundry bin. So that was a really fun like combination of language and visual puzzle element. And like I cannot say enough good things about working with Stellatia. They were amazing. Another part of this that they really, really kind of, it was their baby, but was making sure that the cast had a very nice visual diversity to them as well. These characters aren't supermodels. They're also not, adults who are suntanning in Messina, Italy. Like these are high school kids who hopefully reflect kind of the current world. And just, we've got tall characters, we've got plus size characters, we've got all different haircuts and body types, and just especially in the gender presentation, because we wanted to make this an updated take on the book, and really just kind of reflect the diversity of people these days, but also youth and self-expression. And it was really important to me then in the adaptational elements of the dialogue and the script that none of the drama is because of who anyone is. There are some miscommunications related to maybe sexuality and like people's inability to like say what they want at this age. But none of the talking down or the bullying is because of anyone's identity, except like, oh, you're a freshman, so you're on the bottom of the totem pole. But it's, those kinds of things. There's the school drama of it. But that was really important to me because when I was in high school, I went to an all-girls school, and I remember that like one of the biggest scandals was ever finding out like someone was a lesbian. Like that was like the worst thing you could be in Catholic school at that point. And I know so many of my friends, came out later in life when they felt comfortable to do so outside of the school environment. And I was just, those are my friends. I love them so much. And so I wanted this to be in a space where the kids could be themselves and, explore who they are. And, there's some who know exactly who they are as a person, but they don't know where they fit in the school hierarchy. And there are some who know exactly where they fit in the school hierarchy, but it's caused them to kind of neglect the personal reflection. But I wanted to make sure that none of the wit of the play, which is so juicy and so brilliant, is ever because of who somebody is, as themselves.
I love that conversation about the parts of adaptation. I know that a lot of conversation can focus on the parts that don't translate as well, but I'm curious about the thread that runs true from Shakespeare to now. Or are there particular reflections you have about what wasn't difficult to translate in a way?
There were definitely some like casting decisions where I just had to make sure that, hey, we can't address every single subplot, or if we do, they're going to get adapted in a certain way. I think the romances were actually probably the least challenging part. I think the only funny part that I had to really think about for a little bit was one, the crux of Claudio's misunderstanding, because again,
Mm,
that's more explicitly sexual in nature in the play, and so I didn't want that to necessarily be the case here. But also because the play ends with a wedding, and we're not going to do that in a high school setting. But it
right.
was really then easy to map these kind of milestones onto, the typical high school experience. And yes, it's a little bit also like the fantasy high school experience. I'm thinking just, because I love a lot of 90s media because that's when I was growing up. And so like my vision of high school is still stuck in like Buffy. The editor, Lauren Height Susan, she was fabulous to work with. She had to remind me a few times like kids don't know what a payphone is nowadays because I had a joke about a payphone. And she's like, and if the bad kids are gonna smoke, she's like they vape now, like kids vape now. So that was a little, I'm so glad that she's got her finger on the pulse of this kind of stuff. But other than that, there are dances in the play, and so there are school dances, and um, there's just these environments and the relationships that all stayed true. I mean, um, Leonardo is now Principal Leo. We have an authority figure, and so we're just mapping that onto the grid of a school world, and she is still Hero's parent. And one of my favorite swaps is that the constable is now the college guidance counselor. Um,
Mm.
because I think that's such a funny step that like we're not going to see the kids go off to college, but it's like a looming specter. And I wanted a way to have the constable and her charges still kind of be present in the story and the narrative without like, oh, we had to call the police in. Like that wouldn't work so much. And so, we have a guidance counselor who is more obsessed with, sounding smart than helping kids get to college. So I thought that was really funny, and we kind of modeled her after Emma Thompson as Professor Trelawney in the Harry Potter movies, just because I like that like frazzled look, and I wanted to kind of have a reference to Emma Thompson as well. But I just, it felt, a lot of it felt really natural. And another part that was difficult, but again, I hope people will excuse, is the original play takes place over the course of a week. This obviously we stretched out to about a school year, so there are things you're not going to see taking place, and we were able to use social media as a way to kind of quickly show the passage of time as we see some Instagram posts from the different holidays and the times when the kids are on break. Um, but I also didn't want social media to become too big of a crutch as to like why the kids aren't communicating, or like, oh, they should have seen all of this on social media, like why didn't they have more information? And so that was a line we had to walk as well. But again, I felt like a lot of this came together really naturally just based on the tropes. And that's why, again, I think with these Shakespeare adaptations, like Shakespeare seems so scary and foreign to a lot of students, but again, the themes are so very human that I think you can just really creatively map them onto things. When I was in high school and we did the theater festival and we did Julius Caesar, because we were an all-girl school, we kind of felt like we were at a disadvantage of like, we're going to be up against schools with big burly boys who are, being Julius Caesar and Brutus and doing all this stuff. So we actually did an adaptation that was like loosely based on Chicago. And so with our blocking and our props, we made it seem as though like Caesar's the prison warden and these are all women who are conspiring against him. I had to play Caesar, had to pin my hair back and everything, but it was also important that like Caesar remained being a man in this situation because of the power dynamic. But again, like you can just take those little tweaks and the story is still the same. The heart of the characters is still the same. And then it becomes a situation that hopefully is more relatable to a different audience based on those kind of visual cues.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I love the idea of bringing classic literature into the graphic novel space. Anything that's currently on your reading table that you'd like to mention?
Oh man, I am reading so many things right now. Comics wise, specifically, I'm first of all got my entire pull list. I picked up the last month of it because when I'm deep in writing, sometimes I don't have time to run to the comic book store every Wednesday. I've really, really been enjoying um uh I've really been enjoying Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, like the second series, The Rites of Spring. I'm a big horror reader, which is also very weird. This was like my first really big foray into like you can't use a vampire, you can't use blood, like keep it pretty relatable. But thankfully I knew that story well enough. I'm also reading The Last Wardens from Mad Cave. That's Amit Tishler and Elliot
Yeah.
Spurl, and the artist's
Hmm.
name is escaping me right now. But I'm checking that one out because that one has like a tabletop game and an audio drama, so like that's really cool. Um, yeah, nothing. My reading pile is over there, so I'm looking at it real quick. Um,
The
Nothing
TBR
like
pal.
classic
Yeah.
literature right now, which is kind of funny. I definitely did like reread some of the play and watch some of the adaptations when I was working on Abuzz. But yeah, and then the next book that is on my list, I haven't started it yet, but it's called Walking Practice by Dolki Min. I believe it's a Korean kind of sci-fi horror-ish book about an alien who's trying to kind of pass themselves off as a human. So I'm super into like weird alien sci-fi stuff like that. But I know it's weird. My reading taste outside of like Shakespeare does not reflect any of the work that was done on Abuzz.
I love the wide reading. I love it. And Amit has also been on with Elliot, so absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Oh, just
Uh,
great. Like every time I see him at a con, it's like, oh, the energy is so good. And it's, it was super cool. I picked up the Last Wardens at Comic-Con, and they had a bunch of swag with it too. So he's like, you get a beanie and you get like a fridge magnet, and I love fridge magnets, unironically. So I was like, that was a great, incentive to to pick up the book and support a friend at Comic-Con.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Anything in the writing process that you would share that's been especially helpful for you before we share where people can find where to find the work and things like that?
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm a playlist girl. I will always have a playlist for everything. And I, in fact, made that was one of the first things I did when we were um creating more of the character profiles because Stelladia did the character sketches pretty early on, but I had written the first chapter of the book. We addressed it in like chapters, and they kind of break down throughout the book as like you'll have exposition literature, like here's the syllabus and here's the prom flyer, and those are kind of the chapter breaks. um so Stelladia did the character designs after I had already written the first chapter, so I was writing not really knowing what the kids looked like yet. We had ideas where it was like, we need someone to be the tallest here for a very specific reason, and I'd like to see these elements, but otherwise please design what you want. So once Stelladia had the designs kind of settled on, like everything in my head was super clear, and I could then, it was almost like working with actors, and I could like move them around the scenes and stuff. But I sent them my playlist, and I was like, this is a mix of what I think the kids would be listening to, and also just a mix of like the vibes. And like some of the Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson's score, like the instrumentals were in that, but then we had some Olivia Rodrigo and some breakup songs and like all of that good stuff. So I will always make a playlist at the start of every project. One of the things that helped me help Stelladia as well was there were some times where I was trying to describe something and it was just really complex. And so Lauren would prompt me and say, hey, why don't you try to draw that? And I'm not the artist for a reason.
Hmm.
But I would advocate for any writer who, is having a little bit of a, like, how do I try to explain this? Because if someone else can't get it from you and you don't know how to convey it, it's not going to end up being what it needs to. So I would draw the worst quick sketches. I would go in like Microsoft Paint, or I would take it on a piece of paper, and it's like we're talking stick figures and like drawings and like labels of like this is supposed to be a locker. It's a square with a circle, like, but that's a locker. And it was really fun actually, like just being able to again do super simple, terrible little stick figure sketches because I have the like before and after of like what Stelladio was able to turn it into. And it's like, oh my gosh, when words weren't cutting it, like, that was it was really fun. So I'm always a big advocate for like, even if it's just the worst little drawing, or you can, if there were some hand gestures that I like, was photographing my own hand to like show Stelladia. Um, those were kind of like some of my favorite parts of the writing process outside of like, just going through and writing it. But another thing that really helped me was kind of remembering the core of some of the jokes, and I would try to then write them as if I were trying to explain the joke to somebody else. Like, oh, now it's gonna escape me and I'm gonna embarrass myself. But like, the whole like repartee they have at the beginning where he's like, "Oh, I would that my horse had the speed, my horse had the speed of your tongue," and blah blah blah. And she's like, "Ah, you always end with Jade's trick and you call me a horse and whatever." So I tried to do like a pass where it's like writing that out in colloquial language and then finding ways to put those in. And a lot of lines we actually did get pretty close to the original. There were a lot of places I embellished and added other jokes, but there were like a few ones that were really important to me. So we do get our version of "I would eat his heart in the marketplace" in there. Um, I
Nice.
won't spoil what it is, but I think it's really funny because she's like, there's a cheerleader basketball boy divide. And so she's like, well, if I was one of you basketball boys, like, here's what I would do to him. And so we get some of those like references and insults. And there's a little bit of reference about his facial hair and those things. But so I had to kind of put them through the Amy filter and try to translate them, which always amuses me because I remember again in high school, one of the kind of more odious things was the no fear Shakespeare, because the teacher would be like, I don't
Yes.
want you relying on that solely, because then you'd kind of miss some of the understanding, or you would at least miss the opportunity to parse it out for yourself. Um, but what I'm hoping with this book is that it kind of is like a no fear version. A lot of the plot elements are the same, but there are some things that are different. Hero is a much bigger character in Abuzz than in the original text, I would say. But I hope it inspires someone enough to go in and then kind of again having read it from someone who knows what they're talking about, hopefully, and then going in and reading the text that is now Shakespeare language, going, okay, I get that this is an insult, and they're going back and forth, and they're talking about, scratching someone's face and not making it worse, um, and things like that. So that was something in the writing process that I was trying to be very mindful of, but I was just having a blast doing it as well. So
Cool, cool. Well, it sounds like it was very fun, very playful,
yeah.
and playful with language.
Yeah, and like one of the nicest compliments I could have been given was like Stelladia was turning in the inks for chapters and was like, I was laughing out loud while drawing this and like reading your script and like thinking about the language that's going in on top of this. Yeah, and the fact that, because we spend so much time with the script, but arguably an artist will spend even longer with the pages because they will be reading it, but also then going, okay, now I'm reading it with the analytical sense of like, I need to know what's going in on the page. And so I try to be mindful of that as well. And there's places where I would, talk to Stelladia and be like, hey, if you want to decorate Hero's bedroom, like, I'd love to see, like, for me, it'd be like, I get the vibe that they're into astrology, but like beyond that, do whatever you want. Or like, hey, we're inside of someone's locker, like feel free to decorate it the way you want to. Because I try to do the thing where, I'll tell someone what is essential to have on the page. Like if we're gonna, if something gets broken in a couple panels, I'll make sure that up front, like we have that in panel one. But I don't want to be such a micromanager of that because it's also Stelladia's world, and they were, integral in creating that cast and filling out the world visually. And then, Ellie comes in with the colors. That's Ellie Wright, who I've had the privilege of working with a couple times for Archie horror as well. And her stuff is always very bright, feels very real world grounded. For as much as the Archie horror books were totally not, grounded in reality. Those colors are very bright and very fun. And so, with Stelladia's like fashion and then Ellie's colors, and then Taylor comes in, and that's Taylor Esposito, and does all the lettering, and making sure that it is very cleanly read and that the lettering isn't covering essential parts of the artwork, and just making sure. I felt bad though because we have a lot of characters whose name end with O. We had Claudio, Hero, Leo, and
Hmm.
um, Pedro. And so sometimes the word bubbles would get a little crossed, but we, Taylor's super easy to work with. And then once he kind of put that polish on everything, it was like, oh my God, now we can read back the jokes and the story and everything. But it was just, such an amazing collaborative process. And then again, Lauren shepherding the whole project through, and she had a really good, sense for the audience we were speaking to, the young adult audience. Again, keeping the humor and tonal elements correct. But it was such a cool process. And I loved helping, people and making the references all the way through as well. Because even though the script was the first part that was done, I got to kind of help. It wasn't like I just dropped the kids off at school and I was done. Like we were all building that world together, and it just felt really cool. And one of my other favorite things about the playlist I made is I don't know, and this might be spoilers, I don't know. Hopefully by now, by the time this goes up, Mad Cave will have posted it, but they made these really cute social media graphics that were like playlists that the characters would listen to. So like as a kind of like get to know our
Cool.
cast. And
Yeah.
some of the songs from my playlist ended up on there, but songs that I didn't put in the playlist also ended up on the list. But they had like some of my favorite artists for like listening to the vibes and stuff. And so like Liz Phair ended up on Beatrice's playlist. And I was like, oh my God, like I didn't put that on my playlist, but that is the perfect song. Like I'm so glad that whoever did that on the Mad Cave side and the Maverick side, like they also understood the vibes of the characters enough, from the visuals and from the dialogue and stuff. So I was like really excited about that. I hope they post those because they're so cute. They're like,
Yeah,
here's what Hero's listening
definitely.
to. It's like, yay.
Yeah, connecting reading with listening. I love it. And you mentioned Taylor Esposito, so prolific in the world
Yeah.
of lettering. Yeah,
Yeah, I had only worked with him previously for a 4-page anthology story for an unfortunate one of the like unfortunate Kickstarters that hit its funding and never came out because somebody mismanaged the funds. But so I was like, I
mm,
was eager to work with him again, and that was really great when, because Stelladia and I were working through it for so long before Ellie and Taylor came in. And so Lauren was like, how do we feel about Ellie? And I was like, love it. I've already worked with her 3 times. And then how do we feel about Taylor? I was like, great. I've been dying to get on another project with him. And yeah, he was just, super fast, super professional. Um, and I'm really excited because I know we're recording in the past, but next week, I'm going
mm,
to be speaking at the California Independent Booksellers Conference, and so
cool,
Mad Cave
cool.
has a couple of folks, and other publishers will be there too. But I think we have to have advanced reader copies for the event, so I'm thinking next week might be the first time I get to see it in print. I'm hoping so. I've had the advanced PDF for a while, but like, oh my God, holding it in my hand, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, it gets real. It gets real. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things we did in the lead up, after the book was announced, I sent the reader copy to my high school English teacher, who was the one I did the Midsummer project
very
for.
nice.
Like, I was like, "Hi Jody, it's been many years since I graduated, and I'm glad, I still have your Facebook." And then she sent me her email, and she read it and she really liked it. She said she was proud of me, which was really important to
Oh,
me. But we
yeah.
used we used her little testimonial in the like, so if you go on like the Simon and Schuster page for Abuzz, it'll say like reviews and it says Jody Hill, English teacher. And like that was my high school English teacher. So that's been really fun. And I hope it was cool for her to have a former student come back and be like, hey, I'm an author. Cause like
Oh my
I
gosh, I can't
I have
imagine. Yes,
I have loved
absolutely.
all of
Yeah.
my English teachers. And like I know, just I have a couple of friends who are also high school English teachers and theater teachers. And so it's like you never know where the kids are going to go off, like because you have year after year of the students, but like for a while like you are their teacher, you are the one teacher until maybe next year they'll have a different teacher at the next grade level. But like, it was really important to me that I was like, I don't have the contact info for most of my English teachers, but even my, middle school grammar teacher, it's like she put me on this path to like loving writing. And so like all of them for me have been like a very special part of this process. But Jody specifically taught me a lot of Shakespeare, so I appreciated that. And it was cool to have her read the book.
Where can we find out more information about you? I always like to ask about spaces in person or online that people can go and what's next for you.
Yeah, so I have a website. It is amythunderjam.com. That is a long running in joke, but long story short, I stole it from Chip Zdarsky. Chip prolifically, putting little background gags in books and other things. And once upon a time, he had Amy Thunderjam as a joke somewhere, and I was like, "That's really cool. I'm gonna steal that." So I'm amythunderjam.com, and on most social media now, I use Amy Thunderjam. So that's where I'm at Blue Sky. That's where I'm at Instagram. I was not Amy Thunderjam on Twitter, but I no longer go on Twitter. But I was If She Be Worthy, if people remember me there, because I was a big Thor fan as well. So that's, the Thunder Jam kind of comes in there. I try to keep that as updated as possible. That is also a great place to see. Besides comics, I have written for a number of tarot decks and oracle decks. Um,
Cool.
I also recently just had a book with Sideshow come out of our Critical Role collection, and so it's a kind of a coffee table art book, combining Sideshow's statue collection with details about Critical Role and the making of some of those art pieces. So that's really cool. In person right now, I don't have any plans. I'm shooting for WonderCon next year in Anaheim. I'm SoCal local, so I try to frequent those shows, but I didn't have time to work LA Comic Con into my schedule. And I think that also happens before this episode comes out. So in the new year, I'm going to be looking to do promo for Abuzz. If you have a local comic book store that you'd like me to sign at, like let's talk about it. I'm down to do some travel, especially some West Coast. But yeah, we're gonna, as soon as I have information about any signings, I'll definitely put that up on my website. But right now we're kind of in this cool period where like waiting for Abuzz to come out, but my next stuff hasn't been announced just yet. So,
Exciting
those
times.
darn NDAs. But as
That's
soon as
right.
it's available, it always goes up on my website with links and bells and whistles and hopefully the pre-order dates. So,
Cool, cool. Well,
yeah.
great to meet, great to talk with you, and glad to share this episode, and certainly glad to have you back anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for all you do as an English teacher as well, because you never know. You never know. You're touching young hearts and minds and maybe, instilling a love of Shakespeare, even if the rest of them are like, bah, homework.
Maybe so, maybe so. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's my hope with this, and I think our goal overall with the adaptation, even if one, there's plenty to love for Shakespeare fans and like English nerds, word nerds. So we've got that audience covered. I've had a lot of good feedback about that. But if one, skeptical or reluctant or like, hey, I didn't like it the first time I did it, but maybe high school student, kind of finds a new appreciation or a curiosity or wants to check out 10 things I hate about you, or she's the man and goes like, hey, maybe not the original text, but I'm really cool like with how things are adapted into different formats. Like that's my goal for it. If even one person walks away from this with that appreciation, then I think Abuzz has done its job.
Cool. Lovely words, absolutely, and may it be so. And I know that 10 things about I hate about you will probably make another appearance in my classroom at some point soon. So, absolutely.
Excellent.